What a swift reaction. Muyang's body swayed, appeared on the side of Aizen, and said to Ikemara-jin, and then turned his sight to Aizen on the side, "Why, you still don't put Rukia down? It's really interesting, how do you know that I have Kuchiki Rukia in my hand?" Aizen's face looked at Muyang with a playful smile. With Kaika Suigetsu, he was not afraid of anyone, even if Muyang had hurt him before. Or I should change the question. How do you know that I am standing in front of you? After that, Aizen's body, who was originally standing in front of Muyang, suddenly disappeared, and then appeared beside Ikemara-jin, looking at Muyang with a playful smile on his face. "Because you moved." Just as Aizen finished his words, a voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Aizen could even feel the aura of Muyang behind him spraying on his neck, making all the pores in his body stand up. Puff! A bright light flashed, and a spray of blood sprayed out. Muyang reached out and pulled Rukia, who was lying on the ground, and his body flashed and appeared beside Kurosaki, Ichigo and the others. So strong. Being thrown around like an object, Kuchiki Rukia's heart did not have any dissatisfaction. At this time, she was still immersed in shock and was shocked by the strength of others. Whether it was Aizen or this guy who suddenly appeared, they were all strong. To be beaten so badly by someone, you are really incompetent, Ichigo. Muyang glanced at Kurosaki Ichigo, who was parried by Aizen and fell to the ground, and said. And looking at Kuchiki Byakuya, who suffered the same encounter, Muyang's eyes flashed with a trace of nostalgia. "Long time no see, little Byakuya, you alright down there?" Little Byakuya. Hearing the nickname of Byakuya from Muyang, Renji, who was lying on the other side, suddenly burst out a hot light in his eyes. Even if he was seriously injured, he could not cover up his burning gossip soul. This was the spicy gossip of Captain Kuchiki. Kuchiki Rukia was also shocked. Someone actually called his brother Byakuya in such a casual way. What was the identity of this strong and strange guy? Muyang. Kuchiki Byakuya looked at Muyang, his lips trembled slightly, and then he softly spat out Muyang's name. His face was still cold, without any expression, but Kurosaki Ichigo, who was lying beside him, keenly saw a bit of entangled look in his eyes. "Can I still treat you as an ally of Soul Society?" Looking at Kuchiki Byakuya, who had grown up, Muyang could not help but think of the little Shota who followed him in the past. Now he had such an appearance, although he was lying on the ground now. "I just want to say, I am Shinigami." Smiling at Byakuya, Muyang's face was relaxed and casual. "I know, Teacher Kimura." Kuchiki Byakuya's pale face suddenly showed a smile. Although he had not smiled for a long time, the smile on his face seemed a little stiff, but it was not difficult to see the sincerity contained in his smile. "Teacher." Rukia and Renji were shocked. They were very surprised by the name that came out of Kuchiki Byakuya's mouth. They never knew that Kuchiki Byakuya had a teacher, but if so, it was not difficult to understand that this guy was so strong. After all, he could teach a captain-level person, how could he be weak? Compared with Rukia and Renji's surprise of Muyang's identity, Kurosaki Ichigo, who had known for a long time, was still shocked after hearing Kuchiki Byakuya personally admit it, but he was more surprised by Kuchiki Byakuya's reaction. This guy can actually smile. From the beginning of knowing each other, Kuchiki Byakuya, who had always been emotionless, actually showed a smile. This discovery made Kurosaki Ichigo unable to calm down. He thought that this cool pretentious guy would never smile. What a touching teacher-student relationship. "Mr. Kimura, you are not here to show me your friendship, are you?" Just as several people here had their own thoughts, Aizen, who was ignored, opened his mouth and said. Obviously, he was dissatisfied with their disregard. Although he was injured by Muyang before, he would never feel that he would really lose to Muyang because of a defeat. "What's wrong, are you jealous of my rich emotions?" After all, a guy like you who has no friends cannot feel these emotions. "No." Aizen reached out and pushed his glasses. In comparison, I am still more curious about how you get rid of my Kaika Suigetsu. Tch Muyang looked at Aizen with disdain. You think I will tell you casually? The reason why I am not affected by your Kaika Suigetsu is that I did not see it through my eyes, but felt it through the flow of the air. After listening to Muyang's words, the few people on the ground all looked at the sky speechlessly. You said everything. After listening to Muyang's words, Aizen's eyes flashed a glimmer of light. Before, he did not consider any prevention, and just hypnotized Muyang's vision. He did not care much about his touch. With Muyang's strength, there was a certain possibility that he could crack his Kaika Suigetsu without full effort. After all, Shinigami's battle was Ryuryoku's battle. And Muyang obviously had Ryuryoku who was enough to beat him. I see. I will pay attention next time. Although he was puzzled about what Muyang said, what he said was indeed one factor. This had already increased Aizen's vigilance. In the next fight with Muyang, he must not ignore this factor. The function of Kaika Suigetsu should be catalyzed to the maximum. I am afraid there will be no next time. Before the voice fell, Muyang's figure had reappeared beside Aizen. Zanpakuto in his hand stabbed Aizen's head, and a cold light flashed on the blade. Dang! Just as Muyang's Zanpakuto was about to stab down, Senkaname, who had been standing behind Aizen, suddenly flashed from behind to the side of Aizen. Zanpakuto in his hand stabbed out diagonally, accurately stabbing Muyang's Zanpakuto, blocking Muyang's blade. Just as Senkaname's Zanpakuto had just stopped Muyang, Ikemara Jin quietly aimed at Muyang's body, only to see a bright white knife flash. With a turn of his arm, he pushed away the knife that Senkaname was blocking on his own Zanpakuto. Muyang turned his body and parried his long Zanpakuto. Boom! Ikemara Jin's Zanpakuto became strangely long, and his Zanpakuto which was hit by Muyang's slammed on the ground, raising a piece of dust, which made several people who fell on the side suddenly covered in dust. It's a good cooperation. You have two good subordinates, Aizen. Muyang landed on the ground and looked at Aizen. Then he turned his eyes to Senkaname over there. Your slash is very accurate. I didn't expect a blind person to have such an accurate slash. It can hit my Zanpakuto in an instant. There are really not many people like this. Hearing Muyang's praise, Senkaname's face did not have any joy, but frowned slightly. Your previous speed of slashing has slowed down. I can't accept such praise. It is enough for you to be proud of yourself to be able to take such a slash. Muyang shook the Zanpakuto in his hand, seemingly casually facing the three people opposite him. Although it was 1 against 3, there were still a few injured people on his side, but Muyang did not panic at all. Instead, he looked relaxed, as if he could defeat Aizen at any time. This guy, what on earth does he have? Seeing Muyang's performance, Aizen is a little uneasy. Although it is said that whether it is 100 years ago or today's matter, it has developed in the direction he expected, but Aizen's heart is still a little uneasy, always feeling that Muyang seems to be hiding something. Although Aizen has calculated everything, every time Muyang looks at his eyes, it is like he has seen through everything, making his heart always can't help but feel a little uneasy. Moreover, whether it is the thing that happened 100 years ago or what happened today, Muyang seems to have some reservations. In short, he absolutely did not go all out, so that Aizen can't see what he is thinking. Shwa 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 shwa. Just as Aizen's heart was bewildered, a figure suddenly appeared on the Sokayaku hill. Dong! An ancient cane fell to the ground, leaving a small hole in the ground, followed by a flowery gown floating in the wind, a wild bamboo hat, and a head of flowing white hair. Speaking of which, why is your speed so slow? Muyang turned his head to look at the three people on the side. Didn't we agree earlier? Why is the speed of the three of them still so slow? Moreover, he saw that Shunsui and Yukitake still had some burn marks on their bodies. Could it be that these three people had a real battle? It can't be helped. The old man saw that we were too lazy, so he helped to exercise. After listening to Kuraku Shunsui's explanation, Muyang was speechless. This old fellow trusted him too much. It was such a big matter, but he still had the time to educate his disciples. Did he really think that he would handle everything well? Ah, Captain Commander Yamamoto, Captain Kuraku, Captain Yukitake, I didn't expect you to come so soon. Is it because of Mr. Kimura's prior notice? But if it is because of Mr. Kimura's notice, you should have arrived earlier. Aizen looked at the three people who suddenly appeared, and his face was as calm as usual, greeting the three of them, but his heart was secretly vigilant. Muyang alone was already very tricky for him. In addition to the three of them, it was even more dangerous. It was hard to ensure that they would not have any other backups. Thinking of these things in his mind, but Aizen's face did not show any expression, but still a calm look, looking at the four people opposite him. Just as Aizen spoke with a smile on his face, two vigorous figures suddenly rushed out from under Sokayaku Hill and clung to Aizen. If you dare to move, I will kill you immediately. Soifan and Yoruchi, who appeared beside Aizen and controlled him, threatened Aizen. Caught you. A golden-haired elder sister appeared beside Ikemara Jin, one hand holding Ikemara Jin's arm and the other hand holding Zanpakuto against his neck. With a complicated look in her eyes, looking at Ikemara Jin, Matsumoto Ranjika's heart is a mess. The man in front of her, she has never seen through, whether in the past, now, or in the future, the two seem to be separated by a layer of invisible gauze, hazy, unable to see clearly, perhaps only now, she can catch him. At an angle that Matsumoto Ranjiku can't see, Ikemara Jin mouth reveals a warm smile, just like that time, if time can stay at this moment, just like that, two people snuggle together. Closing his eyes, his mind recalls the scene of the first time they met. The little girl in the snow, just at first sight, suddenly hit his heart. At that time, Ikemara Jin said in his heart, it is her, she will be something he needs to protect for a lifetime, no matter what price, he must make her stop crying. Sen can aim. Just at this time, when Aizen and Ikemara Jin have been separately controlled, a huge body suddenly fell from the sky and smashed on the ground, raising a piece of gravel. Sen can aim. Where is your justice? Why do you want to be Shinigami? Isn't it because of your dead friend? Isn't it to carry out your justice? Where did your justice disappear to? Captain Kamamura, who rushed over, looked at his friend in front of him and roared, his eyes full of disappointment and sadness. His friend had actually fallen to this extent. What I can see in my eyes is only the path that is not stained with blood. Justice is always there, and the path I take is the so-called justice. Hearing the roar of his former friend in his ear, Sen Kaname said with a calm face. How can Kamamura understand his persistence? The justice he insisted on has never changed. He has always been on his road of justice. I don't know what the so-called justice you speak of is, but I will never let you continue to be wrong with Aizen. Even if all the bones in your body are smashed, I will leave you in soul society. Kamamura looked at his friend in front of him, and a trace of fierceness flashed in his eyes. He suddenly raised Zanpakuto in his hand. Bankai. Kokuju Tengen Myo. Rumble. With a loud sound, a towering figure slowly stood up behind Sajin Kamamura. The huge body brought a strong visual impact. Anyone could see that the huge body contained a powerful force. So powerful. Standing on the edge of the well, Oriheim and others saw the rising giant and said with shock. Although Ishida Yuri had seen his Bankai in the hands of Kuratsuchi Mayuri before, and his Bankai was also amazing, but compared with the Bankai of Kamamura, it was a lot worse. At least it was a lot worse in sight. Drink! Kamamura shouted, and Zanpakuto in his hand waved down to Tsenkaname in front of him. At the same time, the towering figure standing behind him also suddenly waved the Zanpakuto in his hand at Tsenkaname with the same movement. The huge blade in the hand of the giant was with the whistling wind, and suddenly waved down with a terrible momentum. Baikud number 81, Dank. In the face of the slash from Kamamura. Tosin Kaname did not have the slightest reaction. He still stood there expressionlessly, as if he did not have the slightest strength to resist. However, just as the incomparably huge Zanpakuto was about to chop down, a voice rang out. A translucent crystal wall suddenly appeared, blocking in front of Tosin. Bang! The moment Zanpakuto and the crystal wall came into contact, the transparent crystal wall turned into pieces and scattered down. Then, a cool breeze rose into the air. It blew past the hands of Jin, who was on the left side of Tosin. Boom! Kamamura's bankai slammed down with a bang, leaving a deep crack on the ground. However, the crack was several meters away from Tosin. Kamamura's powerful swing had actually deviated from his target by several meters. This is... In the instant that the breeze blew past, Muyang raised his eyebrows. From that gust of wind, he felt a familiar aura. Although it had already been 100 years, he would never forget that feeling of Ryuryoku and that feeling. Yuichi Shibata. Everyone, do you still remember? Muyang looked at the figure that appeared not far away and said word by word. This is a bit troublesome. Kyoraku Shunsui held his bamboo hat and looked forward with a bit of seriousness. Isn't he locked in the 5th floor of the underground prison? Sure. Yukitake looked at the ferry not far away, and his tone was a little solemn. For this person who had been a captain 200 years ago, none of them would despise him. So many years had passed. No one knew how his current strength was. Even if he had not advanced for 200 years, he was definitely a terrible opponent. Yuichi Shibata, you escaped the underground prison without permission, and now you are a sinner who protects Soul Society. This old man can't be indifferent to your behavior. Are you showing your position? Yamamoto Genryusai's hand holding the cane suddenly tightened, showing that his heart was not calm. Seeing the betrayal of the person who originally belonged to Soul Society, it made his heart angry. My position has long been decided when those guys in Central 46 room announced it 200 years ago. Yuichi Shibata moored and looked at Yamamoto Genryusai. His face did not change. 200 years passed, leaving some traces of time on his face. The original fierce face became much calmer now, but the light in his eyes became more and more enthusiastic. 200 years of prison life, although it made his temperament much calmer, but it did not calm his desire. Captain Sen Kaname, please don't move anymore. Just as they were confronting each other, Hisagi Shuhai appeared behind Sen Kaname in a flash, holding Zanpakuto up on his neck, and said with a sad tone. Tosin did not panic at all. Instead, the corner of his mouth pulled out a playful smile and sneered. The voice that came out of his mouth was actually a strange voice. Nani? There was a flash of shock in Hisagi Shuhai's eyes, and then there was a sudden alarm in his heart. His body leaned back, and a knife light flashed across his cheek. With a tap of his foot, Hisagi Shuhai retreated a few steps, and there was still some shock in his eyes. The one just now. Kaika Suigetsu. Is that the power of Kaika Suigetsu? He was actually confused unconsciously. He made himself mistake other people for Tsen. In the face of Aizen who has such ability, how can we win? And when did he use Kaika Suigetsu? Nani? It was not only Hisagi Shuhai who was surprised, but also Yoruchi and Soifan. Aizen was clearly controlled by the two of them. When did he use Kaika Suigetsu? If he used Kaika Suigetsu, then the person he and Soifan control is. Yoruchi suddenly flashed a bolt of lightning in her mind. The hands that originally controlled Aizen suddenly loosened, and at the same time, she did not forget to say to Soifan, quickly retreat, Soifan. No need for Yoruchi to explain, at the moment when Yoruchi thought of it, Soifan also thought of it. The two people loosened their hands almost at the same time, and their feet retreated backward. Since the Aizen in their hands might be fake, then if they continue to stay with him, it is likely that they will be attacked without knowing. Is it because you know that you can't resist and give up? Being let go by Yoruchi and Soi Fan, Aizen's face said with a few smiles. Although the so-called control of the two of them was just a joke for themselves, it did feel different to be let go by them voluntarily, especially when they could ridicule the other party. Looking at Aizen in front of them, Soi Fan and Yoruchi were suddenly confused. What was going on? Was what they saw in front of them real or fake? What happened? Are you confused about everything in front of you? Reality? Illusion? Who can say what you see in front of you? Ordinary, like you can only bitterly seek the answer. Aizen tidied up his clothes and said in a flat tone. Seeing the confusion and uneasiness on the faces of these people in front of him, he had a different feeling in his heart. It was this feeling of being above all living beings, but it was not enough. His purpose was to really dominate all living beings. Calm down, Aizen did not use Kaika Suigetsu. Muyang suddenly opened his mouth. Since you are here, won't say hello to me? Masaru Watanabe. I was seen through by you. You are really amazing. As expected of Kimura. Everyone felt that the fog in front of them had dispersed. A figure stood at the place where Aizen had originally been. He held a Zanpakuto in his hand, and his body exuded an innate sense of superiority. His eyes inadvertently revealed the aura of a noble. What a hateful feeling. Seeing the figure that suddenly appeared, Kurosaki Ichigo could not help but say in his heart. Just looking at the person who suddenly appeared, Kurosaki Ichigo felt a burst of boredom. The self-righteous noble aura on the person made him feel uncomfortable. It was a completely different feeling from Kuchiki Byakuya. From the person, only arrogance could be felt. No, no. Muyang laughed at the praise of the person who came. He was not qualified to judge his own ability. As for you, I didn't expect that after so many years, you still have no progress. You this guy. Hearing Muyang's ruthless contempt, Masaru Watanabe's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. If not for this guy, he would not have been locked in the 5th floor of the underground prison with his uncle, and the first level would have been 200 years. Be quiet, don't say anything more. Aizen stepped up, walked to the side, opened his mouth to stop Watanabe, and then turned his eyes to Yamamoto Genryusai, his eyes flashing with a hint of playfulness. Then, head captain, in the face of such a great sinner, I don't know what you are going to do. Yamamoto Genryusai snorted, held his cane, and looked coldly at Aizen standing in front of him. It's just some little tricks that can't be put on the table. Since the performance is over, then stay obediently, little devil. Reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka. As Yamamoto Genryusai's voice fell, a blazing flame rose from his body, and even the air became hot in an instant. Oh. Is head captain going to personally take action? Seeing Ryuryoku and flame rising from Yamamoto Genryusai, Aizen whispered, however, it is understandable to make such a decision. After all, the subordinates are too weak, and only head captain personally took action. However, I think head captain is better to think about it again. After all, if you are defeated by me in front of so many subordinates, it is also a big blow to the ruling prestige of the head captain. Aizen, don't do things like talking. No matter what, you are dead today. If I remember correctly, Yoruchi is still Soul Society's wanted criminal. I don't know what position you are standing here now. Hearing Aizen's words, Yoruika's face changed slightly. She did not expect that Aizen would actually say this. As for the few vice captains standing on the side who did not know, at this time, their faces also changed slightly. Soul Society's wanted criminal. Impudent. Aizen, what qualifications do you have to talk about the matter of the Shihuin? Yoruchi has not opened her mouth, and Soi Fan on one side suddenly jumped out like being stabbed and shouted, Aizen actually dared to oppose Yoruchi in front of her. This is the so-called justice of Soul Society. Aizen smiled contemptuously and then turned his eyes to Yamamoto Genryusai. He did not even look at Soi Fan. So, what are you going to do now, head captain? Looking at Aizen standing in front of him, Yamamoto Genryusai's eyes narrowed, and the next moment appeared in front of Aizen. Zanpakuto in his hand waved to Aizen with a blazing flame. Boom! Aizen faced the slash of Yamamoto Genryusai without any resistance. In an instant, he turned into a pile of ashes and fell to the ground, but there was no joy on the face of head captain. The real Aizen could not be so weak. It's useless. Behind Yamamoto Genryusai, a figure appeared. It was Aizen, who had been burned to ashes by Yamamoto Genryusai's slash. At this time, there was no trace of his whole body. Obviously, the previous blow of head captain did not cause any damage to him. I have said it. My Zanpakuto is Kaika Suigetsu. The ability it has is complete hypnosis. Aizen, who appeared faintly, held his own Zanpakuto in his hand. He looked indifferently at Yamamoto Genryusai not far away, with a faint smile on his face, as if he was holding everything in his hand. The so-called complete hypnosis. Not only can you control 5 senses, but you can also control the posture, shape, quality, touch, and even smell can make people mistake it as an enemy. In other words, you can make flies look like dragons, and you can make the swamp look like a flower field. Of course, you can also treat an ordinary team member as me. How about it? How does it feel to kill your own subordinates with your own hands? Head captain, sir. Nanny. When he heard Aizen's words, Yamamoto Genryusai's pupils contracted slightly. The line of sight turned to the front, and a pile of ashes fell on the ground, and Ryuryoku, who was left on it, was one of the team members who escorted Rukia before. You bastard! Yamamoto Genryusai turned to look at Aizen, with undisguised killing intent in his eyes. He played with life, trampled Shinigami's dignity, trampled Soul Society's justice, and absolutely could not be forgiven. What's wrong? Do you want to kill me like before? Why don't you come? Don't worry, I won't avoid it. Just stand here and wait for your attack with no resistance, just like the team leader you killed before. Schwa. At the foot, Kyoraku Shunsui appeared in front of Yamamoto Genryusai and blocked his sight. Although he knew that Yamamoto Genryusai would not be the impulsive person, he was repeatedly offended by Aizen, and it was difficult to guarantee that head captain would not have a fever. Sure enough, it is a very powerful ability. Your Kyoka Suigetsu, but there is one thing I am not very clear about. Kyoraku Shunsui held his bamboo hat with one hand. He looked as leisurely as ever, but his other hand on Zanpakuto showed that his heart was not calm. Although he did not unsheath Zanpakuto, Kyoraku Shunsui, who maintained this posture, could definitely unsheath his knife at the moment of need. When did you activate Kyoka Suigetsu? When he heard Kyoraku Shunsui's question, Aizen's face showed a playful smile. Then, I also want to ask you a question. When did you start to think that I didn't activate Kaika Suigetsu? What? When they heard Aizen's words, the bodies of everyone present suddenly shook. Seeing the shock on everyone's face, Aizen's face showed some satisfaction, and then turned to Tsenkaname to go to their side. As for the people on Soul Society's side, although their eyes were unwilling, they did not dare to act rashly. After all, Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu was too terrible, and no one dared to guarantee what the consequences would be if they acted rashly. It's about time. After walking to the side of his side, Aizen turned to look at the people on Soul Society's side. Although he wanted to solve all of them now, the time was not yet right, and the other side also had the geographical element. Most importantly, the previous evaluation of Muyang's strength was seriously wrong. Before the right evaluation of his strength, it was not suitable to act rashly. Goodbye, everyone, the next time we meet, everything will be over. Goodbye. Just standing there, what does he want to do? When he heard Aizen's words, Tetsuzeman, who was standing on the side, was puzzled. Although they did not dare to act rashly now, the other party could not escape easily. What did Aizen mean? Schwa boom. Just as Tetsuzeman was thinking, a golden pillar of light suddenly fell from the sky and wrapped Aizen's body. How is this possible? The moment the pillar of light in the sky fell, the faces of Kyoraku Shunsui and Shiryukatake changed. As people who had fought with Minos Grande, they were not unfamiliar with the negation. Minos Grande. Seeing the figure revealed in the sky, Soifon was shocked. Minos Grande actually appeared in Soul Society. Is it Jillian? How many are there? Not just Jillian, there seems to be something else in it. At this moment, a few more golden pillars of light fell from the sky and wrapped up all the people standing beside Aizen. It's a pity. It would be better if you could catch it longer. Goodbye. Slightly turning his head, looking at the messy chrysanthemum standing behind him, with a sad face and a sense of loss, Ikemara Jin's heart surged with an unspeakable emotion. I'm sorry. Looking at Ikemara Jin's body that was gradually rising in front of him, there was a sour feeling in his heart. He was so far away from himself again, without any explanation, without any warning, just like this suddenly left, leaving only his back and full of heartache. Want to escape, this guy? Stop, it's useless. Head Captain. Tetsuzeman, who stopped, looked at Yamamoto Genryusai in confusion. He did not know why Head Captain would stop his movements. That light is called negation. From the moment that light fell, we no longer have the strength to touch them. That might not be the case. Just as the voice of Yamamoto Genryusai fell, Muyang, who had been watching coldly from before, suddenly took a few steps forward and looked up at Aizen, who was gradually rising, and a smile spread on the corner of his mouth. Huh. When he heard Muyang's words, Yamamoto Genryusai turned to him, and his eyes showed a trace of surprise. This kid who he valued very much in the past, would he give himself a surprise? Hearing Muyang's words, several people who did not know him all looked puzzled. Was there anything magical about this guy of unknown origin? Now standing in the negation, you should not be made up with Kyoka Suigetsu. Looking at Aizen who was gradually rising, Muyang's mouth was slightly raised. For others, Aizen is now in a different world from them. They can't touch him. They are helpless for Aizen's arrogant departure. But for Muyang, the current Aizen is like a turtle in a jar. Well, even if you don't dare to show your real body now, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you are now in the world inside negation. As long as you destroy the whole small world, even you will not be able to stand it. What? Destroy the world? Hearing the words from Muyang, the people on the side all showed a shocked expression, destroying the whole world. Although what Head Captain said before, after the negation, it was a little exaggerated, but it was indeed not the same space as the one they were in now. It was not a simple matter to break through the negation to destroy the small dimensional space. Even Head Captain did not dare to say such words. Could this guy really do it? Muyang's footsteps were light, and he slowly walked forward in the eyes of everyone, with a bit of solemnity on his face. Walking to the negation where Aizen was, Muyang slowly stretched out his palm, and a layer of silver light lingered on his palm, giving people a strange feeling. It seems that my guess is correct. Feeling his arm passing through the golden barrier, Muyang's mouth showed a smile. How is this possible? Seeing that Muyang's arm actually ignored the strength of negation and passed through the golden barrier, Aizen's face suddenly could not remain calm. This was beyond his understanding. He had never heard of anyone who could break through the strength of negation. Even if the strength was strong, there was no way. This was the rule, and no one could change it. Just as Aizen was shocked by Muyang's action, suddenly his eyes blurred, and Muyang's body disappeared from the place. Not good. At the moment when Muyang's body disappeared, Aizen's heart suddenly jumped, and his thoughts immediately recovered. Then he immediately felt all the pores on his body standing up, and an unprecedented throbbing came from his heart. A horrifying light gradually enlarged in his eyes. Aizen only felt that time seemed to be still, and the whole world became silent. He even felt the beating of his heart at that moment, the flow of blood, and the contraction of his pores. In an instant, Aizen's body seemed to be out of control, almost instinctively turning his head sideways. The blade in front of him hit his glasses in an instant. It pierced his glasses and then cut through his eyeballs, leaving a wound in the corner of his eyes. A touch of red splashed. He actually dodged it. Muyang waved his hand and shook off the blood on Zanpakuto. He turned his head and looked at Aizen in a different way. The blow just now was the best he could do in such a state. He did not expect to be dodged by Aizen. Avoiding Muyang's attack, but Aizen's heart was surprised and bewildered. At that moment, he really thought he was going to die. If not for the sudden uncontrollable reaction of his body, he really did not know what would happen to him now. What happened to the moment just now? Well. The palm shrunk under the clothes was clenched. Feeling the feeling of the thing in the palm of his hand, Aizen's heart moved slightly. Is he already able to take the initiative to help me? Is he conveying some feelings to me? His mind was filled with thoughts. But Aizen's face was calm and did not show any difference, as if dodging Muyang's attack before was not worth mentioning to him. You dodged? No. I was hit by you. Mr. Kimura, who can make me remember, is really powerful. This is the third time you hurt me. Looking at Muyang standing opposite him outside the wall, Aizen's smile was a little cold, with the blood in the corner of his eyes, it looked like a fierce feeling. Reaching out, he took off his broken glasses and crushed them. Aizen reached out and stroked his hair back. His face once again showed a confident smile. Jayaku had begun to respond to him. He would soon reach a higher realm. At that time, these Shinigami were just chickens and dogs to him, not worth mentioning. You will regret not killing me this time. This is the last time you can touch me. Muyang, I will reach a realm you can't imagine. No one is standing in the sky from the beginning. Not you, not me, not even God is. However, the empty window period of the throne of heaven is about to end. From now on, I will stand in the sky. The sky. I just want to say that every qualified Shinigami has the ability to stand in the sky. Hearing Aizen's words, Muyang said. It has to be said that Aizen's mouth is really good. When such words are said, not only can it make his subordinates be encouraged, but it can also strike the will of Soul Society's group. If he leaves with such words and then swagger away, Shinigami will definitely leave a shadow in his heart. After ridiculing Aizen, Muyang threw Zanpakuto in his hand. With a burst of air, Zanpakuto in his hand changed into a strange shape of a double-edged sword in a blue light. He had liberated his Zanpakuto. Release Zanpakuto. What does Kimura want to do? Seeing Muyang's action, Kuraku Shunsui whispered. On Soul Society's side, only Muyang can pose a threat to Aizen at this time. It is obviously unrealistic to want to leave Aizen and others. What is he going to do? Muyang took a step back with his right foot and leaned sideways. Zanpakuto in his hand aimed at Aizen not far in front of him. Although he was now in the negation, the previous action had confirmed that he could hit him. Tsihua. Muyang aimed Zanpakuto at Aizen, and a visible whirlwind revolved around his Zanpakuto, making a sound that made people palpitate. The speed of the wind blade was getting faster and faster, making a woo-woo-woo sound. Under the high-speed rotating wind blade, Zanpakuto's blade also became looming. Rapid whirlwind break. Muyang shouted, Zanpakuto in his right hand suddenly stabbed forward. The wind blade that was wrapped around Zanpakuto was instantly compressed and condensed on Zanpakuto. With the sudden burst of Muyang's slash, he rushed forward in the direction of Muyang Zanpakuto. With an unstoppable momentum, he ran through Aizen's body and then burst out, destroying the dimensional world where Aizen was. So strong. The people on Sokayaku Hill only felt a sudden burst of wind. It was just that they were affected by Muyang's move, which had already made them feel suffocated. What about Aizen, who was in the center of Muyang's attack? Amazing, just being affected has already hurt me. TSK, is it Kyoka Suigetsu again? Muyang glanced at the broken clothes on Aizen and said with a curl of his lips. What a troublesome ability. Although he can determine his position through the fluctuations when he moves in battle, there is really no good way when he doesn't want to attack. Goodbye, Muyang, Shinigami, and the young man of disaster. Ascending to the top, Aizen reached out to flick his clothes and turned to the people below. Although the clothes on his body were broken by Muyang's previous attack, it did not affect his demeanor at all. The huge black cavity in the sky suddenly closed and restored the peaceful and quiet sky in Soul Society. However, the haze in everyone's hearts could not be dispelled. Facing such an enemy, how should Soul Society deal with it? How is it? Are you alright? Kyoraku Shunsui glanced at Muyang, who fell from the sky and stood beside him. He asked in a low voice with some concern in his eyes. What are you talking about? I am not injured. How can something happen to me? There is no need to force yourself. Glancing at Muyang and standing on the side, Kyoraku Shunsui could even feel his right hand trembling slightly. The move you used just now must have a lot of burden on the body, although the power is indeed very strong. You are still so sharp. Muyang smiled helplessly. He looked at his trembling right hand. The muscles on his arm were stinging from time to time. The attack just now had really caused a lot of damage to his body. Although his bones could withstand such a move, his muscles were still lacking. Was it because he had been too far away from actual combat? It's nothing serious. I just can't use my right hand for a short period of time. Is that so? It's better to let Unohana Captain show you. No need. Looking at Unohana Retsu, who came over, Muyang shook his head. Now there are so many wounded here, let alone other things, even Byakuya is still lying on the ground. They need treatment more than him. Moreover, have you forgotten that my medical level is not bad at all? Well, I was worried about it and almost forgot this. Kyoraku Shunsui reached out to straighten his bamboo hat and looked at the sun gradually falling in the distance. I really don't know how things will become in the future. Hearing Kyoraku Shunsui whispered, Muyang bowed his head and said nothing. His line of sight turned to Kurosaki Ichigo, who was receiving treatment from Oriheim not far away. Although he was still very weak now, Muyang knew that this kid would become stronger and stronger until he defeated all the enemies. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Although his heart is clear about what to do in the future, and he is also very clear about what will happen in the future. He also knows that Kurosaki Ichigo will defeat Aizen in the end, but now things have changed. Muyang can't tell what will happen in the future. In the end, he can only say this and then turn to Byakuya. Oh, your current situation doesn't look good, little Byakuya. Walking to Byakuya and sitting down casually, Muyang looked at the pale Byakuya and smiled. Although it has been done with emergency treatment, Kuchiki Byakuya still had an abnormal pale face. After all, he had lost too much blood in the previous battle, and anyone would be like this. After hearing Muyang's teasing, Kuchiki Byakuya's face did not have the slightest change of emotion. He just looked at Muyang indifferently. His face was unspeakably calm and indifferent, but this calmness made Muyang feel uncomfortable. This paralyzed cabbage was what he was familiar with in the animation of his previous life, but it was not the little Byakuya that he was familiar with in this world. I said, little Byakuya, don't stare at me like this. Being stared at by Kuchiki Byakuya all the time, Muyang only had a strange feeling in his heart. Was the person in front of him the anime character he liked in his previous life, or was he a student he had taught before? After 100 years, what kind of identity and attitude should he communicate with him? No. Looking at the familiar face of Muyang, who was close at hand, Kuchiki Byakuya thought of the general manager of the past in his mind. At that time, he had grandfather, parents, teachers, and Yoruchi who came to tease him from time to time. Now, all he had left was the responsibility of being one of the 4 great nobles, the head of Kuchiki family. Thinking of these things in his mind, Kuchiki Byakuya could not help but be stunned for a moment until he was awakened by Muyang's voice. Looking deeply at Muyang's face that seemed to have no change, Kuchiki Byakuya said in a deep voice, "Can I still treat you as a teacher now?" Hearing Kuchiki Byakuya's question, Muyang was slightly stunned. He really did not expect Byakuya to say such words. Moreover, although he tried to hide it, Muyang still felt a kind of expectation from his tone, and his eyes were also filled with deep expectation. "Of course, as long as you are willing." Although he was slightly stunned by Kuchiki Byakuya's question, Muyang quickly reacted and a smile slowly bloomed from the corner of his mouth. "But I have to say it first." Just after Muyang said with a smile, Kuchiki Byakuya's face suddenly flushed slightly. Although it was very faint, it was very obvious against his face that was particularly pale because of excessive blood loss. His eyes turned slightly, not looking at Muyang sitting beside him. Kuchiki Byakuya continued to say, "If your behavior goes against the rules of Soul Society, I will not show mercy to you." Hearing the words of Kuchiki Byakuya, Muyang was slightly stunned. Looking at his erratic eyes and the blush on his cheeks, Muyang could not help laughing. "What are you laughing at? Don't laugh." Hearing the laughter of Muyang, Kuchiki Byakuya's face suddenly flushed and shouted at Muyang. Hearing Kuchiki Byakuya's words, Muyang laughed again. He laughed more happily than before. This was the Byakuya that he was familiar with. Although he wore a cold mask on his face, he was still the proud little Byakuya that he was familiar with. It was just that the cold appearance was concealed. After a long time, the laughter gradually subsided. Muyang looked at White in front of him, and his tone was a little bleak. "I haven't laughed so happily for a long time." "Yes." Hearing Muyang's bleak voice, Kuchiki Byakuya whispered. The whole story of that year, until now, he was not clear. He only thought that Muyang betrayed Soul Society. But from what happened today, things are not as simple as he imagined. Moreover, these years, the teacher must not have been easy. The atmosphere suddenly became calm. The master and disciple duo did not know what to say for a moment. Byakuya, who had been wearing a cold mask, did not remember how to communicate with the teacher. After the initial excitement calmed down, there was only silence between the two now. But even though they just sat there quietly, there was a warm feeling in their hearts. "Captain," Abarai Renji, who was receiving treatment on the side, turned to look at Kuchiki Byakuya. He was still very concerned about the injury of Byakuya, but he did not expect to see such a picture. He had never seen such Kuchiki Byakuya. At this time, he was not like the cold-faced 6th Division captain, not like the head of Kuchiki family who abided by Soul Society's rules. At this time, he was just a flesh and blood person, and there was no difference from others. This was a side he had never understood. "Muyang. You have worked hard, Unohana captain, Howard Chur Hitsugaya captain and Hinamori vice captain. For the time being, their lives are saved, and next it depends on their own luck. Now Isane is taking over my treatment. Who else is there? Oh, there is Captain Kuchiki and the troublemaker teenager." Hearing the report of his subordinates, Unohana Retsu turned her eyes to Kurosaki Ichigo on the side. At this time, he was receiving treatment in the healing enchantment of Oriheim. Under the treatment of Oriheim, the injuries on Kurosaki Ichigo's body were recovering quickly. Seeing the treatment method of Oriheim, Unohana Retsu showed a trace of surprise in her eyes. The healing ability of this human girl was really excellent, and the healing speed was quite fast. Although it was a spell that had never been seen before, it was not inferior to the healing skill of Soul Society who had been passed down for many years. The injury of the disaster teenager was almost healed. It seems that the teenager should not need our help. Looking away from Kurosaki Ichigo, Unohana Retsu looked at Kuchiki Byakuya on the other side. "You are really too careless, Captain Kuchiki." Walking to the front, she squatted down and glanced at the injury of Kuchiki Byakuya. Unohana Retsu said with a trace of blame in her tone. Later, Unohana Retsu turned her eyes to Muyang sitting beside her, and you, Mr. Kimura, you are too impulsive, such an injury is unnecessary. Teacher, are you injured? Hearing Unohana Retsu words, Kuchiki Byakuya's sight fell on Muyang. Nothing serious, just a small injury on the arm. It will take a few days to rest. Besides, for the treatment of Kido, I have some experience, don't worry. Hearing Muyang's words, Kuchiki Byakuya nodded slightly. He also knew Muyang's ability, so he was no longer worried. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, Kuchiki Byakuya looked at Unohana Retsu and said, "Can you let Rukia come over? I have something to tell her." Of course. Looking at Kuchiki Byakuya lying on the ground, Unohana Retsu gently replied. Kuchiki Byakuya's injury has been controlled, and it is slowly recovering under the effect of Ryuryoku, there is no danger. Kuchiki Rukia, please come over. Unohana Retsu raised her head and said to Rukia not far away, Captain Kuchiki is looking for you. Rukia. Yes, big brother. Rukia walked to the side of White and the expression on her face was a little subtle. She did not know how to face the person in front of her. He adopted himself as an orphan, but his eyes were on himself. Even when he was about to be executed, he did not show any expression. He even wanted to kill himself again and again. What kind of emotion should he face such a brother? There are some things I want to make clear with you. Kuchiki Byakuya looked at the face in front of him that was very similar to his wife, and his eyes showed a rare tenderness. One morning in spring 50 years ago, before the first plum blossom bloomed, my wife died. I know, it's Miss Hisana. When she heard Kuchiki Byakuya's narrative, Rukia's heart suddenly had a sour feeling for no reason. Others said that you liked me because I looked like my wife, so you took me as your sister and brought me to Kuchiki home. Yes, I did tell the people in the family to lie to you like this. Kuchiki Rukia body suddenly shook. Hisana, she is your sister, Rukia. Hearing the secret from Byakuya, Rukia's pupils suddenly contracted. Kuchiki Byakuya did not care about Rukia's reaction. At this time, she had fallen into her own memories. Recalling the time she spent with Hisana, Kuchiki Byakuya's eyes unconsciously showed tenderness, which was the color that Rukia had never seen in the eyes of Byakuya. After Hisana died in the modern world, she and you were sent to the Rukongai. However, she really had no way to survive in that place alone, so she had to abandon the young you and escape. Hisana regretted it very much. In the 5 years that she became my wife, she kept looking for your whereabouts every day. Then she came to the spring of the 5th year and died. I found you every year, so I immediately took you into the Kuchiki family. Bringing people with the blood of Rukongai into a noble family would break the rules and belittle the reputation of the Kuchiki family, so I was opposed by my family. But in fact, when I brought Hisana into the Kuchiki family, the rules had been broken. So since I took you into the house, I swore in front of my parents' tomb. This is the last time to break the rules. In the future, no matter what happens, I will abide by the rules. When I decided to sentence you to extreme punishment, I really did not know what to do. Should I abide by the oath to my parents and not break the rules, or should I abide by the agreement with Hisana to protect my sister? I really do not know which one to choose. Rukia. Reaching out to hold Rukia's hand, Kuchiki Byakuya said with an apologetic look in his eyes, sorry. Tightly holding Kuchiki Byakuya's palm, looking at the weak brother in front of her, Rukia's heart suddenly had a warm current flowing through. It was a happy thing to be loved and cared for by such an elder brother. All the time, the elder brother loved himself and did not ignore himself as he thought. Thinking about this, Rukia suddenly felt that she was wrapped in a huge happiness. A week after Aizen defected. 11th Division. Bang! A figure smashed the window and flew out from the training ground of 11th Division. Very good. Next. The bare-chested Ichigo held a wooden knife in his hand and shouted loudly to the team below, his shiny head shining in the sunlight. "Hey! What's wrong with you? Did no one catch up? Soft feet shrimp." Seeing that the team below were all cowering with their heads down to their feet, Ichigo shouted with dissatisfaction. Because he was injured and stayed in bed for so long, he was now very uncomfortable. Now he urgently needed to fight with someone to relax. "I really can't do anything about you guys. Since that's the case, then let me fight you." "Whoa, you're quite bold, Ichigo." Ichigo put the wooden knife on his shoulder, the corner of his mouth raised, and looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, who stood up provocatively. "Is that okay? Didn't you just recover? I want show mercy. Didn't you and I just recover? Besides, I'm not sick. I just suffered some injuries. Isn't that the same? Didn't the wound just recover?" "Of course not." "Then tell me, what should I call the wound?" "This I don't know either." "See, you don't know at all. Go back and recite the national language from the beginning." "Idiot. What did you say?" "I think you are the one with an empty head." "All right. Then let's see who wins, and who wins is right. How about it?" Ichigo looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, with excitement on his face, and the wooden knife in his hand was raised high. "Oh. Come on. I will let you know that my national language is the strongest." In the face of Ichigo provocation, Kurosaki Ichigo was also not to be outdone. He raised the wooden knife in his hand and looked at Ichigo with a face full of fighting spirit. Just as the two of them were about to exchange their wooden blades. "Shua Dong. Good morning." "Good morning, Captain." Isn't this Ichigo?" "Why? I see that you are in a very good condition." "Ichigo, is the wound fine?" "Yes, thanks to your care, my wound is no longer." Swish. Before Kurosaki Ichigo could finish his words, he only felt a flash of light in front of him. The wooden knife in his hand was immediately cut into 2 pieces. "Is it? That's good. I wanted to find Kimura. But I don't know where he hid. Now that your injury has been healed, then let's have another fight with me without any scruples." Whoosh. Zaraki Kenpachi's words had not finished. Feeling that the atmosphere was a little wrong, Kurosaki Ichigo directly threw down the wooden hilt in his hand and turned to run. "Are you kidding? Fighting with this guy?" The terrible scene when he fought with Muyang a few days ago was still in Kurosaki Ichigo's mind. Unless he wanted to die, he would not fight with Kenpachi again. "Hey! Ichigo! You stinky boy, stop!" Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo turned around and ran without saying anything, Zaraki Kenpachi called out behind him. "I just wanted to talk to you. I don't want to fight with you anymore." The brain once again put back the scene of Muyang and Zaraki Kenpachi fighting before, and Kurosaki Ichigo could not help but shiver. 6th Division Courtyard. "Are you wondering why I am still alive?" Kuchiki Byakuya sat on the bed. Looking at the changing scenery outside the window, he suddenly asked softly. "It has been a week since the battle. Although there are some changes in the heart of Kuchiki Byakuya after a battle, but after a week of peace, he has returned to the unsmiling head of Kuchiki family. After all, the habits that have been developed over the years will not be easily changed. How can it be if you die, who can I aim for the next level? So that's your goal." Hearing Renji's words, Kuchiki Byakuya whispered and his face was thoughtful. "Does Captain also have a goal to strive for?" Seeing the thoughtful expression on Kuchiki Byakuya's face, and then thinking of what he heard on the Sokayaku Hill after the Great War, Renji puffed up his breath and asked the thoughtful Byakuya, "That Mr. Kimura?" "Ah." Turning to look at Renji who was sitting in the distance, Kuchiki Byakuya suddenly had an impulse to talk to him. Perhaps it was because of the loneliness for a long time, or because he saw the teacher who had been away for 100 years again, his mood was difficult to control, or maybe because of Renji, he saw his own shadow that looked forward to Muyang. Teacher Kimura, he was once the goal I longed for and wanted to catch up with. Kuchiki Byakuya looked straight ahead, and his eyes showed the color of memories, apparently falling into his own memories. When I was born, it was when the teacher was at the height of Soul Society's reputation. At that time, the teacher was the most famous person in Godai 13th. Even head captain Yamamoto, at that time, he was not as famous as the teacher. He graduated from True Central Academy in half a year. He was appointed as a vice-captain as soon as he graduated, and he was promoted to captain a year later. Although his teacher came from Rukongai, the talents he showed made all the nobles of Soul Society blush with shame. Moreover, the teacher who was born in Rukongai did not have any conflicts with the nobles. On the contrary, many nobles admired him. During the time when the teacher was the captain, all the members of Godai 13th admired him. Even in Rukongai, he enjoyed a great reputation. As a student, I often felt happy and proud to have such a teacher. Now that I think about it. Even after what happened that year, deep in my heart, I was still proud of being his student. Hearing Kuchiki Byakuya slowly telling everything in a nostalgic tone, Renji slowly outlined an image in his brain. Originally, in his heart, Muyang was just a little mysterious and terribly powerful guy. But after listening to the description of his captain, the image of Muyang slowly developed in his brain, and an image that was still mysterious but made him feel admiration took shape in the brain of Renji. But why would such an admirable person leave Soul Society and live in seclusion in the modern world? And what did Captain mean? Captain, what you said. Renji. I am about to ask something important. Oh yes, sorry. Seeing the unhappy expression on Renji's face, Kurosaki Ichigo apologized without sincerity, and then his face was slightly straight. Do you know where Rukia went? Ah. What happened to Rukia? Forget it if you don't know. Ichigo, how did you climb up the window on the 3rd floor? It's very dangerous. Ah. You are the one, right? You are really amazing. How did you climb up? Seeing Orihime beside him, a drop of cold sweat slid down Kurosaki Ichigo's face. He really couldn't judge a person by their looks. He really didn't know how she climbed up from the bottom of the well. She clearly looked like a lady. Sorry. Renji, Byakuya, then let's go first. Sorry to disturb you. Renji, Byakuya. What are the two of them doing? Looking at Orihime and Kurosaki Ichigo who quickly left the well, Renji whispered. What happened to you, Captain? Turning his head, seeing Kuchiki Byakuya look thoughtful, Renji was stunned. Nothing. Stretching out a hand and stroking his chin, Kuchiki Byakuya whispered. That guy, it should not call my name straight after. Hearing Kuchiki Byakuya like talking to himself, a drop of cold sweat slid down from Renji's forehead. It seemed that it was really possible to keep calling him like this. Come to think of it, Captain. What do you mean by that thing you just said? Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo and Orihime leave the well, Renji sat back on his stool and looked at Kuchiki Byakuya and asked. For Kimura, who was not familiar for him yet, Renji was now full of curiosity. Nothing, I am not very clear about what happened in the past. Hearing Renji's question, Byakuya said coldly. After Kurosaki Ichigo's disturbance just now, he had lost his interest to continue. What's more, he did not know much about the things of that year. After all, he was still young at that time, and he had not joined the Godai 13th, and was not qualified to touch those. Damn it! Ichigo, that bastard. It's all his fault that he came to disturb now. Captain obviously lost interest. The next time I see him, I must beat him up. Seeing that Kuchiki Byakuya had lost the topic of conversation, Renji was slightly disappointed. He could only curse in his heart and secretly decided to teach him a lesson the next time they met. Poor Renji, completely forgot that his strength was not enough to teach him a lesson. But the powerful figure of Muyang on the Sokayaku hill flashed through his mind, and he couldn't help but be moved. He really wanted to know the person whom the captain looked forward to so much. Speaking of which, Ichigo seemed to know Senior Kimura. It seemed that his slash and shunpa were taught by Senior Kimura. Speaking of which, that kid was really lucky. If there was a chance to go to the modern realm to carry out a mission next time, he should be able to see Mr. Kimura. After seeing him, perhaps he could understand why the captain looked forward to him so much. No, not only that, if he could get his guidance, he might be able to catch up with the captain. Thinking that he could catch up with Byakuya, Renji felt a burning desire in his heart. If there was a mission sent to the modern realm next time, he must strive for it. What did you say? Oken. Seeing the shock on Yukate's face, Muyang nodded. He also knew how much shock his words just now would cause to Yukatake and Kyoraku, so he did not feel strange about the fierce reaction of Yukatake. How can it be? Aizen actually dared to. Seeing that Muyang was once again sure Yukatake was absent-minded, that was Oken, he did not expect Aizen to have such a rebellious idea. Well, Kimura, how do you know? Although Kyoraku Shunsui is also shocked, but it is not like Yukatake. The more he encounters such an important thing, the calmer his mood is. He reached out to hold his bamboo hat. Kyoraku Shunsui's eyes flashed a trace of wisdom, and then he looked at Muyang and asked. This is what Kisuke and I analyzed, but you can go to the Hall of Spirit Library to check it. There should be traces of eyes and information he has checked. That's true. Hearing Muyang's suggestion, Yukatake touched his chin and had a thoughtful expression on his face. In this case, Kyoraku, you accompany me to go to Spirit Library Hall to have a look. There is really no way. I was going to find a place to sleep. It is rare to have such a good weather. It is really hard to live. Seeing Yukatake looking at him, Kyoraku Shunsui smiled helplessly. He always had it difficult to refuse Yukatake's request. Well, in that case, let's go together, Kimura. Kyoraku Shunsui looked at Muyang and said, trying to pull Muyang with him. I won't go. Hearing Kyoraku Shunsui's words, Muyang quickly waved his hand and refused. He did not want to go to the library with Kyoraku and Yukatake to check the information. Facing the vast information over there was definitely a mental torture. If he had to choose, he would rather fight with Kenpachi, at least he could enjoy the fun of fighting. Don't be like this. Come with us. Anyway, it's boring for you to go alone, isn't it? Although Muyang had already refused. But Kyoraku Shunsui obviously did not want to let him go just like this. He walked over and put his arm around Muyang's shoulder. Kyoraku Shunsui said affectionately. I don't want it. If you want to go, just the two of you can go. I haven't returned to Soul Society for a long time. I don't want to waste time here with you. I want to see what the current Soul Society has become. After breaking free from Kyoraku Shunsui's arm, Muyang patted his shoulder with a look of disgust in Kyoraku Shunsui's eyes and then turned to leave. I really can't stand him. He is really lazy. He actually pushed all the things to us. Looking at the back of Muyang, Kyoraku Shunsui complained with dissatisfaction. Well, Kyoraku, don't complain anymore. The two of us should go to the Great Spirit Book corridor first. Yes, I understand. Kyoraku Shunsui retracted his hand into his sleeve and responded with a lazy look. But what's wrong? The direction Kimura left seems to be in the direction of 10th Division. What about it? Although it has been 100 years, Soul Society actually has no change. Kimura, of course, still went to 10th Division along the road he is familiar with. After all, he has been a 10th Division captain for such a long time. In fact, when he was Soul Society, he was almost always in the identity of 10th Division captain. There are really not many geniuses like him. By the way, speaking of geniuses, the current captain of Chur Hitsugaya is also a genius. Ah. Yes, the captain of Tsenkan is also a very talented person. Speaking of Hitsugaya captain, Yukatake, I heard that you often give candy to him. Ah, it's not often, but sometimes I will give him some candy when I meet him. But Kuraku, who did you hear it from? Me. I heard it from Miss Matsumoto when I was drinking last time. However, what Miss Matsumoto said is true. I thought she was talking nonsense after drinking too much. It seems that our big handsome brother is still so gentle. What? Kuraku, you. Really, after so many years, Soul Society really hasn't changed. Walking on the familiar road, Muyang couldn't help but let out a sigh. Although there was no longer a familiar figure among Shinigami who hurried along the road, Soul Society's layout and street were still the same as 100 years ago. There was almost no change. Why do I feel that Soul Society's air is emitting a smell of decay? The air is clearly much better than the industrial society in the modern world. In 100 years, the modern world developed rapidly, and everything produced a huge change. However, Soul Society did not change at all. The backward system, the decaying system, and the monotonous life. This place is. Muyang stopped and looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar place in front of him. He did not expect that he would subconsciously walk to the 10th division. The power of habit was really strong. Even after 100 years, he would still bring him back to the 10th division. However, the people he was familiar with were already gone. Hey, kid, which division are you from? Why are you sneakily standing at the door of our 10th division? Muyang looked at Shinigami, who was looking at him with vigilance, and felt a little stunned. He was actually regarded as a guy with bad intentions. Are you talking about me? Looking at the person in front of him, Muyang pointed to his nose and confirmed. Of course, I am talking about you. The guard at the door looked at Muyang. His heart was more and more suspicious of his identity. His eyes were full of vigilance. At the same time, he secretly put his hand on his zanpakuto. The incident of the accident a few days ago had just passed. Now he dared not take it lightly. I have never seen your face in Soul Society, and there is no mark of your division on your clothes. Tell me honestly, what is your identity and what is your intention? Seeing the vigilance of this guy in front of him, Muyang suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect to encounter such a black dragon incident. He really doubted whether this Shinigami in front of him had paranoia. This imagination was too rich. What's wrong? Just as Muyang did not know whether to laugh or cry, not knowing how to deal with it, a voice suddenly came from the other side. Captain. Hearing the voice coming from behind him, the guard immediately straightened up and bowed respectfully. What is going on? The young boy with a head of white hair, Chur Hitsugaya, casually responded, then turned to look at Muyang, and his eyebrows suddenly wrinkled together, his young face with a little bit of immaturity, but there was a sense of maturity that did not match his appearance. Yes. Captain, this person. Hearing Chur Hitsugaya's words, the member standing on the side immediately responded, and then he was about to tell Chur Hitsugaya his speculation about Muyang's identity. I am not asking you. Impatiently interrupting the words of the team members on the side, Chur Hitsugaya's pair of emerald eyes looked at Muyang. Originally, he was very annoyed by Matsumoto Ranjaku, who was drunk in the room, and now he was not in a good mood to face the team members at the door, and even looked at Muyang with some irritability. Nothing, just when I came here, I stopped because I thought of some things, so I was thought of by the little brothers here. Muyang spread his hands and said to Chur Hitsugaya with a helpless expression. Really? Chur Hitsugaya held his forehead with his hand, his face was helpless, and he was really annoyed to death recently. This guy is called Muyang, a friend of Soul Society. Pointing to Muyang, Chur Hitsugaya casually explained to the players around him. Although he was injured that day and did not see the situation of Muyang and Aizen fighting on the Sokayaku hill, he still felt the movement when Muyang and Zaraki Kenpachi fought a few days ago. This was definitely a powerful guy, and he knew several captains. If he let him make trouble because of his own players, there might be some trouble. You are Captain Kimura. As soon as Chur Hitsugaya's voice fell, the team member who was listening to him suddenly raised his head and cried, his face full of excitement. Captain Kimura. Hearing the exclamation of his team member, Chur Hitsugaya looked puzzled. This guy is the captain. Do you know me? Compared to Chur Hitsugaya's doubts, Muyang had a lot of doubts in his heart. Why did this guy in front of him seem to know him, but he did not have such a face in his memory? Moreover, he did not look like 100-years-old person. How could he know him? As if seeing Muyang's doubts, the member hurriedly explained, I heard my father mention you. Father has always said that you are the person he respects the most. Your father? Could it be that his father was once his subordinate? That was the only explanation. My father's name is Ikitani Maruyama. Hearing the name that Shinigami said in front of him, a familiar face suddenly flashed in Muyang's mind. He blurted out, 12 seats of the city valley. Ah, Lord Kimura, you actually still remember my father. I think if Lord Father knew, he would definitely be very happy. Hearing that Muyang actually called out his father's seat, this Shinigami's face became even more excited. Of course, the 12 seats of the city valley are very outstanding officials. How could I not remember? Unexpectedly meeting the son of his former subordinates, Muyang also felt very happy, and his face could not help but reveal a smile. I didn't expect that other than those long-winded old men, there are other people who know you in Soul Society. A long-winded old man. Hearing Chur Hitsugaya's words, Muyang was slightly stunned. Did Soul Society have so many old men? Yes, it's those old men. Every time they have a meeting, they will quarrel over some trivial things. It's really annoying. Chur Hitsugaya nodded, his tone full of resentment. He really had enough of those guys. Muyang was stunned for a while, and then reacted. The few long-winded old men that Chur Hitsugaya said should be the other captains. I really don't know what kind of reaction they would have if they heard Chur Hitsugaya called them. Well, indeed, compared with you, they are really old men. Muyang nodded, his eyes looked up and down on Chur Hitsugaya, and his eyes glanced back and forth constantly reminded Chur Hitsugaya his height. You bastard! Feeling the eyes on his body, the veins on Chur Hitsugaya's forehead burst out. This guy was provoking him. Ha 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 ha. Seeing Chur Hitsugaya's reaction, Muyang could not help but laugh. Seeing his gloomy face was about to drip water, Muyang quickly stopped laughing and asked Chur Hitsugaya with a straight face, by the way, Hitsugaya, what did you want to do before? Call me Chur Hitsugaya. Hearing the name of Muyang to himself, Chur Hitsugaya's eyebrows jumped up, saying that he was familiar with him, actually calling his name. I know, Chur Hitsugaya. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Chur Hitsugaya suppressed his anger and said almost word by word. You can see it. It is really amazing, as expected of the captain. Chur Hitsugaya just suppressed his anger and heard the voice of Muyang, his face suddenly became ugly again. Don't be angry. You are often angry that the president is not tall. You. Hearing Muyang's teasing words, Chur Hitsugaya's eyes almost spit out fire, but in the end, he suppressed his anger. The other person's sentence not tall was almost like a needle in his heart. The height was the heart of his heart for so many years. Who? Taking a deep breath to calm himself down, Chur Hitsugaya said to Muyang with a cold face, if you have something to do, you can go first. I want to see Hinamori. Chur Hitsugaya, you really like to joke. You know what I can do. I only know those old men in Soul Society. There is nothing to do. I will go with you to see your little girlfriend. What? Don't talk nonsense, what little girlfriend? Hearing Muyang's words, Hitsugaya jumped up as if his buttocks were burned by fire. His cold face suddenly became red, his eyes were a little shy, and his eyes were erratic. His hands kept swinging, trying to deny what Muyang said before. I know, I was just joking with you. Why do you have such a big reaction? Muyang pretended to look at Hitsugaya with a puzzled look, but the smile in his eyes could not be concealed. You bastard! Seeing the smirk in Muyang's eyes, Hitsugaya knew that he was played by him again, and his heart was suddenly angry. Glancing at Muyang's young face, Hitsugaya said, speaking of which, you are also an old man, and you are still talking about them here. What? I am still a teenager, okay? How can you call me old man? Don't you see my face full of youth? No matter how young you look, you can't hide the fact that you are an old man. Looking at the slightly excited Muyang, Hitsugaya deliberately attacked, but did not notice that unconsciously, they had arrived outside the ward of Hinamori. What are you talking about, Captain Hitsugaya? Just as Hitsugaya finished his words, a gentle voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Although the voice was very gentle, but in the ears of Hitsugaya, it seemed to have a chill. Even Hitsugaya, who has the strongest ice system Zanpakuto, cannot help but shiver. Captain Unohana. Hitsugaya turned his head and looked at Unohana Retsu standing behind him with a gentle smile on her face. His heart could not help but bulge. He felt that he seemed to have provoked something bad. What were you talking about before, Captain Hitsugaya? Seeing Hitsugaya turn around, Unohana Retsu smiled even more, but in the eyes of Hitsugaya, it was a little terrible, and his heart could not help but be covered with a layer of haze. No, nothing. This is a ward. I don't want to see you talking loudly outside the ward next time. Do you understand? Looking at Unohana Retsu who was sticking to him with a smile like a flower, Hitsugaya felt a little cold in his heart and could not help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. His voice was a little dry and answered, I know. That's good. After obtaining the recovery of Hitsugaya, Unohana Retsu smiled and the previous oppressive atmosphere was swept away. Who? Feeling the powerful aura of Unohana Retsu disappear, Muyang could not help but let out a sigh of relief. It was a long-lost feeling. It was so terrifying. Oh right, and you too. Mr. Kimura, don't speak loudly in the ward again. Just as Muyang breathed a sigh of relief, Unohana Retsu suddenly turned her eyes to him and said to him in an extremely gentle tone. Understood. Hearing Unohana Retsu's gentle voice, Muyang could not help but shiver and immediately answered, with a proper attitude and respectful tone. After looking at Muyang with a smile, Unohana Retsu turned her eyes to Hitsugaya. You are here to see the Vice Captain Hinamori. Yes. After mentioning Hinamori, Hitsugaya's mood became obviously depressed. What happened between them during this period of time made him tired. Whether it was the misunderstanding of him before or the fact that Hinamori was almost killed by Aizen, it made Hitsugaya feel like a knife was twisted in his heart. He never hated his weakness as much as he did at that time. Say a few words to her. She needs someone very important to her to talk to her to wake her up. After walking over to check on Hinamori's condition, Unohana Retsu turned her head and said to Hitsugaya standing at the door. She still knew about the matter between Hitsugaya and Hinamori Momo. The current Hinamori needed someone to wake her up. No need, I have nothing to say to her now. Standing at the door and quietly looking at Hinamori Momo in a coma for a while, Hitsugaya said in a low voice, his eyes were lonely. I'll go first. If Hinamori wakes up, please inform me as soon as possible, Captain Unohana. Seeing Hitsugaya, Unohana Retsu still wants to say more, Hitsugaya said. Looking at Hitsugaya, Unohana Retsu nodded. Sorry to trouble you. After nodding to Unohana Retsu to express his gratitude, Hitsugaya turned and left, not forgetting to pull away Muyang who was standing at the door. I said, you can leave, why do you want to pull me away? I am afraid that you will affect the recovery of Peaches there. After letting go of Muyang's clothes, Hitsugaya replied with a matter-of-fact look. She also said that she is not your little girlfriend. Seeing Hitsugaya's smelly fart appearance, Muyang can't help but tease. You bastard. Don't talk nonsense, bastard. Hearing Muyang's joke, Hitsugaya jumped again. That girl is very important to you, right? Hearing Muyang suddenly speak in a serious tone, Hitsugaya was slightly stunned and then whispered, yes. Being unable to protect the person you care about, this kind of feeling is not good. Hearing Muyang's words, Hitsugaya frowned, and there was a flash of displeasure in his eyes. What do you want to say? I want to tell you. This is just the beginning. The battle between Aizen and Soul Society is just the beginning. If you are still only at this level when the battle officially begins, the situation you don't want to see will happen again. Hearing Muyang's words, Hitsugaya frowned. How could he not know what Muyang said, but even if he knew, what could he do? Even if he knew, it was completely unrealistic to want a captain-level person to improve their combat effectiveness in a short period of time. He was not Kurosaki Ichigo. He could increase his combat effectiveness by learning Bankai. Basically, there would not be any big changes in a captain-level battle. After all, it had already reached such a level. What, do you have a brilliant idea? Hitsugaya frowned and asked casually. Of course, if you accept my training. Oh, accept your training. What? You mean that as long as I accept your training, my strength can be greatly improved? Of course. Muyang looked at Hitsugaya in front of him with a smile, but the process is very difficult, I just don't know if you can stand it, Hitsugaya. I accept. Hitsugaya looked at Muyang, there was no hesitation in his eyes. No matter what kind of difficulty he had to go through, he had to become stronger. Only when he became strong enough, he could protect Hinamori and not let her suffer any harm. This is the official door. Of course, for the sake of you, I have already put in the erasure converter. Oh, what a spectacular sight. Looking at the tall door in front of her, Orihime exclaimed. Ichigo. Mr. Yukitake. Seeing Yukitake waving to him not far away, Kurosaki Ichigo felt slightly puzzled, but still walked over. This is for you. Eh? What is this? Kurosaki Ichigo took the small sign that Yukitake handed to him with a black skull head and asked. The combat license of Proxy Shinigami. It is considered a favorable occasion in the appearance of Proxy Shinigami. Soul Society has a rule to give this thing to the other party. If you use this, you can become Shinigami at any time. Although I don't think it can make up for what you have done for us. Nothing, I just did this for myself. I will accept this thing. Thank you, Mr. Yukitake. Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo put the license into his arms, Yukitake showed a smile on his face. Eh? That Mr. Kimura, aren't you going back with us? After accepting the license, Kurosaki Ichigo glanced at Muyang who was standing next to Yukitake and asked strangely. I have some things to deal with in Soul Society. Hearing Kurosaki Ichigo's question, Muyang answered casually. What's wrong? Aren't you going to go with me? Hearing the voice coming from behind him, a strange feeling welled up in Muyang's heart. Sure enough, he still couldn't get used to this voice. I say, Yoruchi, is it so good to turn into a cat? I am still more used to your original voice. It feels strange to talk to you like this. Is that so? Why do I feel like you want to see me turn into a human form at the moment? Hearing Yoruchi words, Muyang did not have any reaction. On the other hand, Kurosaki Ichigo, who was standing on the side, immediately blushed. Obviously, he remembered the beautiful scene that he saw that day. Hey Ichigo, what happened to you? Why did your face suddenly become so red? Orihime, who had been talking nonsense with Kuchiki Rukia for a long time, came over and looked at Kurosaki Ichigo with concern. As he spoke, he put his hand on his hair clip. "It's fine. Don't worry about it." "Really? But Ichigo, your expression is very ugly." Orihime looked at Kurosaki Ichigo with a bit of doubt, but there was still a bit of worry in her eyes. "Don't worry, I'm really fine." Seeing that Orihime was still a little worried, Kurosaki Ichigo quickly suppressed the messy thoughts in his heart, then looked at Muyang and said, "Since Mr. Kimura is not with us, we will go first." Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo change the topic, Muyang could not help but feel funny. He was really a shy boy. "Well, in that case, they are all handed over to you, Yoruchi. Don't worry. Time is up." A ray of light rose from the door, and it was time to leave. "Goodbye, Rukia." "Well, goodbye, Ichigo, and, thank you. This is what I should say. Thank you, Rukia, thanks to you. Finally, the rain is over and the sky is clear. What a magical traveler." Seeing the figures of Kurosaki Ichigo and others disappearing into the realm gate, Kiraku Shunsui said with his hand pressing his bamboo hat, his tone mixed with some emotion. "What's wrong? Do you feel that you are getting old?" "Indeed. I am getting old. The growth of young people always makes the old people feel amazed. Speaking of which, Kiraku, how is the information you and Yukitake found yesterday?" "That?" Hearing Muyang mention this matter, Kiraku Shansui's expression became serious. "This place is not suitable to talk about this, let's change to another place." A moment later, in a tea house. Muyang, Kiraku Shunsui and Sure Yukitake sat opposite each other. In fact, since that day when Aizen defected, the matter about him has been investigated. It is just that some places belong to the forbidden area, even the captain can't casually step in, so the investigation has been not smooth. Really, it's so troublesome. That's why Soul Society's system is really too rotten. Fortunately, it's still in the situation where the Central 46 is gone. It's not good to say it like that, Kimura. TSK, come on, Kiraku, you must be thinking the same thing in your heart. Ahaha. Hearing Muyang's words, Kiraku Shunsui smiled and laughed, then picked up the teacup and took a sip to cover up his embarrassment. "However, after getting your hint yesterday, I and Yukitake went to check the information about the King Key, Oken. Sure enough, there was a trace of Aizen reading." Speaking of this, Kiraku Shansui's face became more serious, and his eyes were full of solemn color. But because the preservation of King Key has always been passed down by Godei 13, so Aizen can't find the preservation place of King Key. What he checked is the creation method of King Key, and the creation of King Key requires 100,000 souls. Things have been clear. Picking up the teacup and taking a sip, Muyang opened his mouth to break the silence in the room. "Well, basically we can determine Aizen's purpose. What is Soul Society going to do? Is there any plan?" "This is not yet. Although we already know the purpose of Aizen, we have to further confirm it. Moreover, Kuratsuchi Captain's research on Hijayaku has not ended. Before we make a plan, we need to know more about Aizen." "I know, then I will wait here for a few more days." "Wait for what?" "Wait for the staff sent by Soul Society to go to Human World with me." "Hey, it's so strange. Kimura, you actually stayed behind to wait. Do you know who Old Man Yamamoto will send to the modern realm?" "How would I know what Captain Commander is thinking?" "Then who are you waiting for?" "Although I don't know who Captain Commander is going to send, I think if the Captain Hitsugaya volunteered, he should not refuse, right?" "What's the matter, Kimura, do you have any thoughts on Captain Hitsugaya?" "Then you have to get the approval of our handsome guy, right, Yukitake?" "Huh?" Hearing Kiraku Shansui's teasing words, Muyang turned to look at Sure Yukitake with a strange look, his line of sight swept up and down, making Sure Yukitake feel uncomfortable all over. "What's wrong, why are you looking at me like this, Kimura? By the way, shouldn't Toshiro be your illegitimate child? Just as Sure Yucatake was feeding Muyang's gaze and feeling uncomfortable, Muyang suddenly opened his mouth and said. Puff. Just as Muyang's voice fell, Kyoraku Shunsui, who was sitting opposite him, suddenly spat out a mouthful of tea that he had just drunk. Hey, be careful. Kyoraku, you almost sprayed it on me. Muyang looked at him and complained. Sorry, but Kimura, what you said is too shocking. You really don't stop until you shock people. Yes, Kimura, why do you have such a thought? Sure Yucatake looked at Muyang with a little dissatisfaction on his face. I just said that. You see that your hair color is the same, and Sure Hitsugaya has such a high talent, and you are so good to him. Right, Kyoraku. Listening to you, Kimura, it seems that it is true. Yucatake often buy some snacks for him. Kyoraku Shunsui put down his cup and said with a thoughtful look on his face, but the smirk in his eyes could not be concealed. You two guys. Looking helplessly at Muyang and Kyoraku Shunsui, Sure Yucatake shook his head. For these two guys, he was really helpless. He could only ignore them. He picked up the tea on the table and slowly drank it. Hey Kimura, what do you think about this battle? Putting down the teacup, Sure Yucatake looked at Muyang and asked with a serious face. Oh. Yucatake, you actually need to ask for my opinion. After Muyang teased, his face also looked a little solemn. The final step of the battle is hard to say. It depends on the extent of the cooperation between Aizen and Hueco Mundo. As far as I know, Hogyoku has the ability to break the boundary between the god of death and the void. Regarding the avatar of death, you all know what happened back then. What I want to say is the Arrancar. If Aizen can collect more than 10 Vasto Lord level Arrancar, our chance of winning are really not great. Vasto Lord? That is an existence that is even stronger than captain level. Can Aizen find so much? Kyoraku Shunsui wondered. I don't know. But then again, does Soul Society have any information about the Minos Grande of Hueco Mundo level, Kyoraku? You know, I was not interested in that before. I don't know if there is any information about this area. I have not paid attention to this before. After all, the Minos Grande of Vasto Lord level generally won't take the initiative to provoke Soul Society. All the information about them will be rare. Forget it, I will check the information immediately. This time, do you want to go together, Kimura? No, you can check it yourself. I have other things to do. Huh? What do you mean? For example, sleeping, drinking, and so on. You. By the way, when I was in Hueco Mundo, I met a very powerful Arrancar. Hearing Muyang's words, Kyoraku Shunsui's face immediately became serious. What's the name? Vladimir Eric. What kind of hollow is that? Since you can say that it is very strong, it should not be a simple thing. I also did not fight too fiercely with him. It was just a probing fight. However, he gave me a strong feeling. His ability is related to fire. Fire? Yes, it is a fire attack, but I am not sure if it is all his ability. However, even if I only see the ability he displayed, the general captain is definitely not his opponent. So strong. This is only when I saw him 100 years ago. Who knows how he has become now? If he joins hands with Aizen. Muyang did not say the rest of the words, but everyone knew what he was going to say. If the two powerful guys joined hands, it would definitely be a disaster for Soul Society. Well, that's it for now. You two go and check the information. If Soul Society has some information of Hueco Mundo, it will be good. At least we can get some information about the enemy in advance. Yes. After drinking the tea in the cup, Kyoraku Shunsui picked up his Zanpakuto which was on the side and put it on his waist. Looking at Muyang who also stood up, he asked, What are you going to do now, Kimura? Don't tell me you really want to find a place to sleep. How can it be? I want to go to the Spiritual Arts Academy to meet the instructor. Indeed, you have not seen him for 100 years. It is good for you to meet him now. Then I will go with Yukitake first. After all, he was a person who had experienced many things. Kyoraku Shunsui and the other two could understand Muyang's mood at this time. They walked forward and patted Muyang on the shoulder, and the two left side by side. I really miss him. After sighing in a low voice, Muyang put his hand in his pocket and slowly walked toward the direction of the Spiritual Arts Academy. Around 100 years had passed, and there was no hurry for this moment. How is it, Captain Eisen, is the experiment successful? It can be considered a success. Looking at the huge figure that broke free from the restraint outside on the screen, Eisen's mouth showed a smile. Next, just put it in the present world. Let's check what level he can do. Can such a mixed fish really do it? It feels like he can't play any role at all. Ikamaru Jin looked at the hollow in the screen and said in a doubtful tone. This level of hollow is completely ineffective. No. This hollow once killed Kurosaki Ichigo's mother. If we let him go, we might catch someone we expected. Moreover, it is because he is a mixed fish hollow that he can reflect the strength of Jayaku. Forget it, Captain Eisen, you always have your own ideas. By the way, Jin, how is our companion? Hey, do you mean that guy? He has been sleeping recently. Come to think of it, is that guy really as powerful as Captain Eisen you said? When he heard Eisen ask about that person, Ikamaru Jin's face showed a trace of doubt. Anyway, he had no good impression of the arrogant and narcissistic guy. Lord Eisen's words are unquestionable. You are too rude. Ikamaru Jin. Huh? Ikamaru Jin turned to look at Senkaname standing on the other side of Eisen. His eyes that had been closed slightly opened a crack, and a cold light blue flashed out, revealing a dangerous breath. Well, really, so you are really boring. Just as the atmosphere gradually became tense, Ikamaru Jin suddenly closed his eyes again and showed his signature fox-like smile on his face. With a lazy tone, Ikamaru Jin turned around and waved his hand. Lord Eisen, Ikamaru Jin is really rude. It's okay, I don't care. As if he did not notice the subtle relationship between Ikamaru Jin and Senkaname before, Eisen's sight still stayed on the screen, and the expression on his face did not change at all, but in his eyes, there was a little imperceptible excitement. The game of cat and mouse. It's really interesting, I don't know what kind of fun you will give me. Was he aware of it? Ikamaru Jin's hands were curled in his sleeves, walking slowly in the corridor of Las Noches, but he always had a bad feeling in his heart. He always felt as if he was trapped in a net woven by a smart hunter, tempting him to step inside step by step. When he walked into the net would suddenly be closed and strangle himself. A trace of haze slowly rose from Ikamaru Jin's heart, and even his face, which had always maintained a smile, became a little gloomy. Watanabe Ichiro was wandering on the road in boredom. After he and his uncle followed Eisen from Soul Society to Hueco Mundo, he had been in a boring state. Compared with Soul Society, only the Hueco Mundo in the desert was really too boring. Even in the Las Noches with artificial sky, it was the same lifeless. That is. Looking around, his eyes inadvertently saw Ikamaru Jin appearing at the intersection in front of him. Watanabe Ichiro's heart could not help but move. To be honest, he was still unhappy with Ikamaru Jin, because although he was a genius, Ikamaru Jin was a genius than him, and Ikamaru Jin's smile always made him feel uncomfortable. Although there are all kinds of dissatisfaction with Ikamaru Jin in the heart, after all, they are under Lord Eisen and will fight together in the future. The relationship between them must be good. Besides, Ikamaru Jin's position under Eisen is much higher than his. Thinking about wanting to get familiar with Ikamaru Jin, Watanabe Ichiro walked behind Ikamaru Jin and said, "Hello, supermarket Just as Watanabe Ichiro walked to the back of Ikemura-jin and spoke, Ikemura-jin body, who was slowly pacing, suddenly moved. Watanabe Ichiro only felt a blur in front of him. The next moment, a zanpakuto was already on his throat, and a cold murderous intent came from the zanpakuto. Gulu. A drop of cold sweat slid down from Watanabe Ichiro's forehead. Feeling the cold aura on his neck, Watanabe Ichiro's heart was cold. If the Ikemura-jin's zanpakuto moved half an inch forward, he would be dead. There was no luck at all. In that moment just now, he did not see Jin's movements clearly at all. Even his nerves did not react. Oh, so it's Mr. Ichiro. I thought who it was. After seeing the face of the person in front of him, Ikemura-jin put away his zanpakuto and the fox-like smile returned to his face. But the smile that originally made Watanabe feel strange appeared very dangerous in his eyes. In the future, don't suddenly get close from behind like this. Otherwise, you will die. After saying this to Watanabe Ichiro in a teasing tone, Ikemura-jin didn't care about him at all. He directly put zanpakuto away and then turned to leave. Turning around, Ikemura-jin cheered for himself in his heart, recalling the first encounter with Ranju. A rare tenderness flashed in his slightly opened eyes, and then turned into firmness. It's really interesting. In the empty hall, Aizen sat on a high stone seat, holding his chin with one hand, looking at Ikemura-jin in the screen in front of him, and the corner of his mouth pulled out an unknown smile. Interesting. Shinigami, it is really a bad life. Step 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 step. With a burst of footsteps, a figure walked to the side of Aizen. Pure white flawless skin, handsome facial features, blood-red pupils, slender figure, and a small hole in the middle of the eyebrows. The face of the person had a high look, and the whole body exuded a proud atmosphere, full of a kind of evil charm. You are here, Eric. Aizen's face remained unchanged, as if he had not heard the ridicule of the person who came, and his face still had that smile. Since coming to Hueco Mundo, his temperament had changed more and more. Now he was full of a confident temperament, as if everything was in his hands. Well, how are you preparing, Aizen? He reached out and took a glass of red wine. Vladimir Eric's movements were very elegant, and with the handsome face like a demon, if it was a human world, it could definitely charm a lot of girls. Don't worry, there is still some time before the complete awakening of Jayaku. As long as Jayaku awakens, we will win this war without a doubt. Victory in the war. I don't care about that at all. All I care about is one thing: kill the Shinigami named Muyang. There is no conflict in our goal. Don't worry, as long as the war begins, Muyang will definitely show up. Then, for our victory, cheers. He raised the glass in his hand and touched Aizen gently. There was a flash of excitement in Vladimir Eric's eyes. Modern world, Ding Ding District. Bang! What are you doing, Hiyori? It hurts. You deserve it. I asked you to find Kurosaki Ichigo, but you haven't made any progress until now. I think you have wasted your time on that golden-haired Orihime. Actually. What? If you have something to say it quickly. That Orihime is my first love. Bang. It hurts, Hiyori. Don't hit my nose. I will beat you to death, but you still dare to say such shameless words. Shinigami is really a strange creature. Holding a drink on the table, Lilynette looked at Hiyori and Shinji, who were noisy in front of him. What's wrong? Hearing Lilynette's sigh, Kuna Mashiro, who was lying on the side in the same position, blinked and asked. If you had invited him in the name of Kimura, Kurosaki Ichigo would have agreed to join you. Why did you invite him in the name of the Visored? After hearing Lilynette's words, Kuna Mashiro tilted her head and thought for a long time, then turned her eyes to Hiyori. What? I say, why don't we invite Kurosaki Ichigo in the name of Kimura? In that case, he definitely won't refuse, right? Hearing Kuna Mashiro's words, Hiyori, who was originally lecturing Hirako Shinji, suddenly stopped. The expression on her face was somewhat strange. Idiot, how can it be the same? What's wrong? We want to invite our companions, the companions of our visored. But isn't Kimura our companion? It's not the same. Kimura is just our companion, but not our kind. Hey, Hiyori. Hearing Hiyori's words, Hirako Shinji whispered, and his face became a little ugly. What's wrong? Don't you think so too? I know that Kimura is our good friend. We have been taken care of by him for so many years, but in the end, Kimura is not the same as us, isn't he? Hearing Hiyori's words, the people in the room were silent. They did not know how to answer Hiyori's question. This was indeed a difficult question to answer. Although Muyang was indeed their good friend, Hirako Shinji stubbornly wanted to use the name of the visored when inviting Kurosaki Ichigo to join. It was not without this consideration. We are half hollow. After abandoning Shinigami's identity, even if our friends are still around, we can no longer return to how we were before. We are the visored, the Shinigami who stepped into the virtual realm. We are nothing. The room suddenly became quiet, and only Hiyori's low voice echoed in the room. Hirako Shinji sat on the side, his eyes lowered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Love held his comic book in his hand, but his eyes fell on somewhere. Lisa was also absent-minded. The lewd book in her hand could not make her excited, and Kensei was unconsciously wiping his zanpakuto with a cloth in his hand. Rose's fingers were unconsciously tapping on the other side, and Hachi sat there with his hands crossed, silent. Even Kuna Mashiro stopped shaking his legs. In the silent room, a depressing atmosphere gradually rose, making everyone in the room feel awkward, but no one broke this strange atmosphere first. Ah, what's wrong? What happened? Why aren't you talking? A lazy voice suddenly sounded, breaking the strange atmosphere in the room. Swoosh, swoosh. At the moment the voice just fell, everyone in the room turned their eyes and aimed at Stark, who appeared in the room with sleepy eyes. What's wrong? Suddenly targeted by the eyes of more than 10 people, Stark suddenly felt a pressure. Even he, in the face of such a strange situation, was a little overwhelmed for a moment. The hand that was rubbing his hair stopped involuntarily. The smile on his face also seemed a bit stiff. After hesitating for a moment, Stark spoke again with a hesitant tone. No. Nothing. Hearing Stark's voice, Hiyori shook his head and left a back of her head for Stark. Obviously, he did not want to answer Stark's question. Although she has lived together for so many years, she is still very uncomfortable with Stark. That lazy look is just like Kisuk, making her feel uncomfortable. Although I don't know what's going on, I always feel like something big has happened. For Hiyori's attitude, it was non-committal. After so many years, Stark had long been used to Hiyori's attitude towards him. He rubbed his slightly messy hair and made them more messy. Stark walked to the bar counter, took out the wine from the cabinet below and poured himself a cup. He took a sip and let out a comfortable groan. Leaning on the bar counter, Stark held his chin with one hand and shook the wine glass with the other hand, looking calm. Then, can you tell me what happened? After all, we have lived together for so many years. We are like each other's family. Although our identities are different, I don't think it will affect our relationship. Family? Hearing the word spat out from Stark's mouth, everyone in the room was shocked. For them, this is an unattainable word. Stark and several people don't say it. They were born in Hueco Mundo and never knew what family is. In Hueco Mundo's cruel environment, there is only killing and death. Stark and others are like this. Hirako Shinji, they are not outdone. Most of them were born in Rukongai and have never felt the beauty of family. The word family can only be seen in books, and now Stark said they are family. Family. As he muttered these two words in a low voice, everyone couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Although they didn't communicate with each other, just carefully tasting these two words was enough to fill their hearts with warmth. TSK, who wants to be family with this baldy Shinji? Hiyori looked at Shinji and suddenly jumped down from her stool. She said a disdainful sentence and then turned around to walk towards the backyard. However, her tone was not imposing at all. Moreover, there was a layer of blush on her face. Although it was not very obvious, everyone present clearly saw it. Bang! After walking into the backyard, Hiyori did not forget to slam the door shut and let out a loud noise. Hey, Hiyori, just now, your face seemed to have turned red. Kuna Mashiro put a finger in her mouth and looked at the back door that was still shaking. Suddenly, her head tilted and she blinked her big eyes as she said playfully. Ha 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 ha. As soon as Kuna Mashiro finished speaking, a burst of violent laughter erupted in the room. Looking at everyone who was sitting together and laughing, the corners of everyone's eyes suddenly became wet. Looking at their companions around them, a feeling that was even stronger than before slowly brewed in front of their chests. Those idiots, who is their family? Leaning against the door and listening to the bursts of laughter coming from inside the room, Hiyori felt the joy in everyone's laughter. She bit her lips and said, but her eyes became a little red, and there seemed to be something sparkling in her eyes. Ha-choo! What's the matter, Mr. Kimura? You seem to have caught a cold. Do you want me to take a look for you? No need. Captain Unohana, I am fine. You should check the injury of Kenpachi. Hearing Unohana's words, Muyang quickly waved his hand. He did not want to be examined by her Zanpakuto for no reason. What if her meat swallowed him? Thinking of this, Muyang suddenly felt that his stomach was a little uncomfortable. Captain Zaraki's injury is no longer serious. There are no fatal wounds on his body. It is only because of the intense battle that he is still unconscious. But Mr. Kimura, are you really okay? I see that your face is a little ugly. Do you want me to treat you? No. Hearing Unohana talk about this terrible thing again, Muyang quickly refused, but the more ugly face made the concern on Unohana's face become more and more intense, which made Muyang shocked. He was really afraid that Unohana would suddenly release HWR Zanpakuto and swallow him in one bite. Since there are no problems with Sword 8's injuries, then I will leave first. I will come to see him after he wakes up. Goodbye, Unohana Captain, thank you. After saying that, Muyang directly turned around and left quickly. The pressure that Unohana Retsu gave him was too strong. He was really a little afraid of this black-bellied sister, whether in the past or now, or even in the future. Oh, running so fast, as if scared of someone is a terrible thing. Looking at Muyang who fled in a sorry state, Unohana Retsu covered her mouth and laughed softly. There was a signature kind smile on her face, which made people can't help but feel good, but only familiar people can feel the horror behind her smile. But the eyes turned to Zaraki Kenpachi on the bed, and the smile on Unohana Retsu face faded, but with a concern and thinking. This is the fourth time he sent Zaraki Kenpachi to 4th Division. Every time he passed out after the battle reached the limit, but Zaraki Captain has few injuries, even if there is, it is the kind of injury that can be recovered in a short time. But what made Unohana Retsu more concerned is the growth of Zaraki Kenpachi's strength. For the growth of Zaraki Kenpachi's strength, Unohana Retsu is clear. Every time he lives from the life and death moment, Zaraki Kenpachi's strength will have a great improvement, which is his gradual release of his strength in the life and death battles. The figure of a teenager full of wildness flashed in his mind, and Unohana Retsu's heart could not help but ripple. I really look forward to you recovering your strength, the only man who can please me,